What if I told you that becoming wealthy has very little to do with intelligence and almost everything to do with behavior? Some of the richest people in history were not the smartest, and some of the smartest people have gone bankrupt. So what separates the wealthy from everyone else? Do they have secret knowledge, a higher IQ, or is it something else entirely? The answer lies in something that schools never teach us: the psychology of money. In this video, we're diving deep into The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, a book that reveals why the way you think about money is more important than how much you earn. In this podcast, you'll learn why some people stay rich and others lose it all, the hidden power of compounding that makes the rich richer, how fear, greed, and luck play a bigger role in wealth than you think, and most importantly, how you can start thinking like the wealthy today. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the rich think differently and how you can too. So stick around because this could change the way you see money forever. Let's begin. Chapter 1. No one's crazy. Think about the last time someone made a financial decision that left you scratching your head. Maybe your friend cashed out their 401k to buy a boat, or your cousin took out a loan to invest in crypto just because it was trending. It's easy to judge, right? But Morgan Housel starts The Psychology of Money with a powerful reminder. No one's crazy. See, money is personal, deeply personal. How we view it, how we earn it, spend it, save it, invest it, is shaped by our individual experiences. And that means no two people will ever see money the same way. Let's rewind to a simple truth. If you were born in 1950, you probably grew up in a world where the stock market was something your parents warned you about. After all, the Great Depression wasn't ancient history. It was your grandparents' trauma. That kind of fear can linger for generations. But if you were born in the 90s or later, you might have only seen headlines about the longest bull run in history or the tech boom. That makes you more likely to trust stocks, maybe even jump into the market head first. Housel shares the story of two men, both intelligent, both successful, who handled money in radically different ways. One was a janitor named Ronald Read, who lived frugally his whole life, invested consistently in blue-chip stocks, and died with an $8 million fortune. The other was Richard Fuscone, a former Merrill Lynch executive who had a massive income and lived the high life until he filed for bankruptcy. How does that happen? How does someone with a modest income die wealthy while someone earning millions loses it all? It boils down to mindset. Ronald Read understood that wealth isn't about what you earn, it's about what you keep. He wasn't flashy. He didn't try to impress anyone. He just saved, invested, and let compounding do its quiet magic over decades. On the flip side, Fuscone wasn't crazy either. He just operated from a different set of beliefs, perhaps shaped by a career in finance, an environment that rewarded risk in excess. His decisions made sense to him and his world. That's the heart of this chapter. We all carry invisible scripts. Maybe your parents argued about money. Maybe you struggled to pay rent in college. Maybe you got burned in the 2008 crash. Those moments live in your memory. They whisper to you when you make choices, and they're different for everyone. Money isn't taught like math. We don't sit in classrooms learning how to emotionally respond to risk, greed, or envy. Instead, we learn from our environment, from our neighborhood, from the good years and the bad ones, from stories our families tell or don't tell, from that first paycheck, that first overdraft, that first lucky break. So when someone does something with money that doesn't make sense to you, it's probably because their story's different. Maybe they grew up poor and now they splurge because they want to feel free. Maybe they fear another recession, or maybe they simply value different things. Hussel's point isn't just to create empathy, it's to help us understand our own biases too. Because once you realize your financial worldview is shaped by a narrow slice of experience, you also realize it might be incomplete. It might be holding you back. Maybe you're too conservative with your investments because you're still haunted by a past market crash. Or maybe you're chasing risky gains because you've never known what it feels like to lose big. There's also a beautiful humility in accepting that there's no single right way to do money. Sure, there are principles that tend to work, like saving more than you spend or investing for the long haul. But beyond that, it's personal. Your goals, your values, your fears, and your dreams, they all come into play. House Sell wants us to get curious instead of judgmental. Why does that person spend money that way? What's their story and what's mine? Here's a quick analogy that brings it home. Imagine money like religion. We all grow up in a kind of financial faith shaped by our parents and surroundings. Some people stick with that faith. Others rebel against it. But none of us are completely objective. We all believe what we believe for deeply personal reasons. In a world filled with hot takes, Reddit forums, and financial influencers, this chapter is a grounding force. It reminds us that personal finance is just that, personal. Before we judge or copy someone else's choices, we need to understand the life behind them. So what can you take away from this? 1. Your experience with money is valid, but it's not universal. Stay open to other perspectives. 2. Avoid quick judgment. Everyone has reasons for the financial choices they make. 3. Reflect on your own story. What shaped your money mindset? Are those beliefs still serving you? 4. Use empathy, not envy. It'll make you a better investor, a better planner, and honestly, a better human. By starting the book here, House Sell sets the tone. Money isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's emotion, memory, identity, and belief. And once you understand that, you can start making decisions that truly align with who you are. Chapter 2. Luck and Risk. Imagine two men, Bill Gates and Ken Evans. Both were brilliant students at Lakeside School in Seattle during the 1960s. They were close friends, top of their class, and shared a passion for computers. But their lives took dramatically different paths. Gates went on to become one of the richest men in the world. Kent, sadly, died in a mountaineering accident before he turned 18. Same school, same era, same access to early computers. One built Microsoft, the other never got the chance. That's where Morgan Housel takes us in this chapter, the strange, unpredictable dance between luck and risk. We like to think of success as a direct result of hard work, talent, and good decisions. And often that's true, but it's never the whole story. There are invisible forces at play, moments of pure luck or unexpected risk that shape outcomes in ways we can't control. Take Bill Gates. He admits he was incredibly lucky to attend one of the only high schools in America with a computer program in the late 1960s. That access gave him a head start. But for every Bill Gates, there were countless others, just as smart, just as driven, who didn't get that head start. Maybe they went to schools without computers. Maybe they didn't meet the right mentor. Or maybe, like Kent Evans, they simply ran out of time. It's hard for us to accept how much randomness affects our lives. We want clean narratives. We want to believe people succeed because they're good and fail because they're not. But life isn't that neat. Sometimes a business thrives because it caught a lucky break. Sometimes it crashes because of a freak accident. And here's the kicker. Luck and risk are two sides of the same coin. You can't see them. You can't measure them precisely, but they're always there. One gives, the other takes. What feels like a brilliant decision in hindsight might have just been good timing. What looks like a mistake might have been the right move that got unlucky. Think about investing. Someone might put all their money into a risky tech startup and walk away a millionaire. Another person might make a similarly bold bet and lose everything. Were they dumb? Not necessarily. They both rolled the dice. One hit, the other didn't. And yet we're quick to call the winner a genius and the loser reckless. That's why House Sell encourages us to zoom out. Instead of obsessing over individual stories, we should study patterns. Rather than asking, what did this one successful person do? Ask, what do most successful people tend to do? The former gives you a potentially skewed narrative. The latter gives you a broader, more reliable picture. For example, Warren Buffett is often held up as the gold standard for investing success, and rightly so. But House Sell points out something fascinating. 99% of Buffett's wealth came after his 50th birthday. His greatest advantage isn't just his investment strategy. It's the fact that he's been investing since he was a teenager and hasn't stopped. Time and consistency, not just brilliance, played a huge role. Luck also works in reverse. Consider people who made smart, cautious financial choices, but still lost big in the 2008 crisis. They weren't foolish. They were just caught in a storm no one saw coming. That's risk. It doesn't care how smart you are. It just shows up. So what does this mean for us? Should we stop trying? Should we just cross our fingers and hope for the best? Not at all. The point isn't to give up control. It's to recognize what's in your control and what's not. You can control your savings rate, your spending habits, your risk tolerance, and your time horizon. You can't control the market, inflation, pandemics, or global recessions. That's why humility is such a powerful financial tool. If you succeed, give credit to both your efforts and the unseen luck that helped you along the way. If you fail, don't be too hard on yourself. It might not be entirely your fault. Understanding this balance makes you wiser, not weaker. Husserl also encourages something that goes against a lot of financial advice. Avoid idolizing people too much. Because if you copy someone else's financial strategy without understanding the context, without knowing the role luck or risk played, you could end up in trouble. Just because a billionaire took on massive debt to build a company doesn't mean that's a good idea for you. And maybe the biggest lesson here? Be kind. When someone's struggling financially, it's easy to assume they made bad choices. But what if they were just unlucky, lost a job, got sick, had a family emergency? The truth is, we're all more vulnerable to luck and risk than we'd like to admit. So approach money, yours and others, with a little more grace. Recognize your wins without arrogance. Accept your losses without shame. And remember, life isn't always fair, but that doesn't mean you can't play the game well. In the end, we're all just trying to do the best we can with the cards we're dealt. Sometimes you get a royal flush. Sometimes you get a pair of twos. The skill is in how you play the hand. Chapter 3, Never Enough. There's a story Housel tells early in this chapter that'll stick with you. Two men, Kurt Vonnegut and Joseph Heller, are at a party hosted by a billionaire hedge fund manager. Vonnegut turns to Heller and says, "This guy makes more in a day than you've earned from Catch-22 in your whole lifetime." Heller replies, "Yes, but I have something he will never have. Enough." That one sentence, "I have enough," is the beating heart of this chapter. We live in a culture that constantly tells us more is better. More money, more status, more followers, more everything. But the truth is, if you never define what enough looks like for you, you'll chase forever. And that chase, it can ruin you. Look at Bernie Madoff. The guy was already massively wealthy. He had a successful business, prestige, connections, everything most people dream about. But it wasn't enough. So he built the biggest Ponzi scheme in history. Why? For more. And what did that greed get him? A ruined name and a life in prison. This chapter is a wake-up call to recognize the dangers of moving the goalpost. Because here's the thing, if your financial happiness is tied to comparing yourself to others, you'll lose every time. There will always be someone with a nicer house, a faster car, a bigger portfolio, always. And if you let that comparison drive your financial decisions, you're not in control. Your ego is. Housel makes this brutally clear. If expectations rise with results, there is no logic in striving for more because you'll feel the same after putting in extra effort. It's like climbing a never-ending staircase. You think you're reaching the top, but every time you hit a new level, the top moves further away. That's exhausting and dangerous because in the pursuit of more, people often take on risks they don't need. Think of someone who's built a solid investment portfolio, enough to retire comfortably. But instead of staying the course, they start gambling on high-risk crypto coins or leverage-heavy stock plays. Why? Because watching others get rich faster triggers that fear of missing out. They forget their own plan. They forget that they already have what they need. And sometimes it's not even about the money. It's about status. It's about keeping up with the Joneses or the Kardashians. Social comparison is poison for financial peace. The guy who upgrades his car every year isn't necessarily rich. He might just be deep in debt. But we only see the surface. We assume more equals better. That's why defining your version of enough is one of the smartest financial moves you can make. Enough doesn't mean settling. It means clarity. It means knowing what you truly value, what you need to feel secure and content, and recognizing when you've reached that point. Housel also talks about the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Rich is what you see: cars, clothes, big houses. Wealth is what you don't see: savings, investments, financial freedom. And people chasing more often sacrifice wealth to look rich. They trade long-term security for short-term admiration. Now let's get real. This mindset of never enough doesn't just hit billionaires. It can show up in our daily lives too. You get a raise, and instead of saving it, you upgrade your lifestyle. New apartment, new clothes, new subscription services. You tell yourself, I've earned it. And maybe you have. But if every raise leads to more spending, you're running on a treadmill, moving fast but going nowhere financially. So how do you break the cycle? You start by asking, what am I actually working for? Is it to own more stuff? Or is it freedom, time with your family, peace of mind? When you tie your financial goals to your values, you create a buffer against the never-ending pressure for more. Hassel isn't saying you shouldn't be ambitious. Ambition is good. Growth is good. But endless, unexamined ambition can be toxic. There's a line between pushing yourself and destroying yourself. He says, there's no reason to risk what you have and need for what you don't have and don't need. That line hits hard. Why risk your marriage, your health, your sanity, or your reputation to squeeze out a few more dollars? Especially when you already have a good life? There's a calm that comes with knowing you're okay. Not because you've won the lottery, but because you've defined what success looks like for you, and you've reached it. You can breathe. You can enjoy your life. You can stop climbing just because everyone else is. And maybe that's the ultimate flex in today's world. Not the Rolex, not the Range Rover, but being able to say, I'm good. I've got enough. So next time you catch yourself getting swept up in comparison or chasing more for the sake of more, pause. Look at what you have. Ask if it's already enough. Because sometimes the most powerful financial move isn't earning more, it's wanting less. Chapter 4, Confounding Compounding. Let's talk about the quiet force that builds empires, shapes fortunes, and, if we're being honest, is way more powerful than most of us realize: compounding. Morgan Housel kicks off this chapter with a name we all know: Warren Buffett. But he doesn't just talk about Buffett's investing genius. He shows us something most people miss. Buffett's fortune isn't just about his strategy or IQ, it's about time. Here's the kicker. Buffett started investing when he was 10 years old, and he's now worth over $100 billion. But if he had started at age 30 instead of 10 and retired at 60, just like most people do, his net worth wouldn't be anywhere close to what it is today. In fact, it'd be a tiny fraction of that. So what's the secret sauce? It's not just being a great investor, it's being a great investor for a very, very long time. Housel's point is simple, but it changes everything. Compounding only works if you give it time to work. That sounds obvious, right? But here's the problem. We're wired to think in linear terms. We expect 2 plus 2 to equal 4, but compounding works exponentially. It's slow at first, maddeningly slow, and then suddenly it snowballs. To put it in everyday terms, imagine trying to get fit. You do a few push-ups or go for a jog for a week and nothing. No six-pack, no weight loss. But stick with it for a few years, and it transforms your body. It's the same with money. Investing consistently might feel like you're getting nowhere in the short term, but decades later, the results are mind-blowing. Let's use an example. Suppose you invest $5,000 every year from age 20 to 30, and then stop. You never invest again. Then your friend starts investing $5,000 a year at age 30 and does it until she's 65. Guess who ends up with more money at retirement? You do, even though she put in way more money over time. Why? Because your money had a head start. It had time to compound. Husserl emphasizes this again and again. Small gains, repeated consistently over time, lead to massive results. But most people never get to the massive part because they bail when the progress seems too slow. That's why compounding is so confounding. It feels counterintuitive. We live in a culture of immediacy: Amazon Prime, same-day delivery, viral success. And compounding, it's the total opposite. It rewards patience. It rewards consistency. and it punishes impulsiveness. This is where a lot of people go wrong, not because they don't understand compounding, but because they underestimate it, or worse, they interrupt it. They switch strategies too often, they panic and pull their money out during a market dip, or they try to time the market. But compounding needs uninterrupted time to do its thing. It's like planting a tree. You don't dig it up every few months to check the roots. You water it, give it sunshine, and wait. Same goes for investing. Let the money sit, reinvest the earnings, avoid touching it. That's how you win. Housel also points out that compounding isn't just about money, it's a mindset. It applies to relationships, careers, knowledge, habits. Think about it. Reading 10 pages a day doesn't seem like much, but over a year, that's 3,650 pages, a dozen books or more. Learning one new skill every year might not feel like a big deal either, but in 10 years, you're a whole different person. One of the coolest takeaways from this chapter is the idea that good investing is not necessarily about making good decisions. It's about consistently not screwing up. That's huge. You don't need to be a genius. You don't need to time the market perfectly. You just need to stay the course and avoid big mistakes. The way Housel frames it is so refreshing. He's not here to sell you on some flashy get-rich-quick system. He's saying, hey, look at how the world's wealthiest people got there. Slowly, patiently, through compounding. It's not sexy, but it's real. And it really challenges the hustle culture mindset. You know, the one that says you've got to grind 24/7, always be chasing the next big thing. But the truth is, slow and steady often beats fast and flashy, especially when you let time do the heavy lifting. Another beautiful idea in this chapter is that compounding rewards behavior more than brilliance. In other words, being consistent and patient matters more than being the smartest person in the room. That's great news for the rest of us. You don't need a PhD in finance to build wealth. You just need discipline. So what's the big takeaway from this chapter? Time is your most valuable asset, not money. Time. The earlier you start, the longer you stay invested, the more you let compounding do its thing, the better off you'll be. You don't have to hit home runs. Just avoid striking out. You don't have to be perfect. Just be consistent. Build habits that stick. Make small choices that add up. Let your progress compound and then give it time. Because in the end, as Housel so perfectly puts it, the most powerful force in finance is not returns, but time. Chapter 5. Getting wealthy versus staying wealthy. There's a big difference between getting rich and staying rich. And Morgan Housel dives deep into this paradox in Chapter 5. It's one of the most eye-opening parts of the book because it challenges this common belief that if you've made money once, you've got it all figured out. But nope, not even close. See, getting wealthy usually involves some mix of taking risks, being optimistic, spotting opportunities, and pushing forward even when others are playing it safe. It's about boldness, hustle, ambition. Think of tech founders, Wall Street traders, entrepreneurs. They often bet big, and sometimes it pays off in a huge way. But here's the twist. The same mindset that helps you build wealth can actually destroy it if you don't adjust. Staying wealthy requires something totally different. Survival skills. It's about humility, caution, and that unglamorous word, prudence. Morgan brings up some fascinating stories and data points here. One standout example is Jesse Livermore, a stock market legend in the 1920s. This guy made one of the largest fortunes of his time during the 1929 stock market crash. At just 30, he was worth the equivalent of billions in today's dollars. But here's the tragic part. He lost it all, multiple times. His story didn't end well. Why? Because he didn't know how to stay rich. He kept betting big, thinking his past success guaranteed future wins. And that's one of Housel's key messages. Past success can actually make you overconfident. It tricks you into believing you're invincible. That lightning will strike again. But markets change, life changes, and the rules that helped you win before won't always keep working. That's why staying wealthy is all about avoiding the ruin. You don't have to hit the jackpot over and over again. You just have to not blow up. In fact, one of the most underrated financial skills, just staying in the game long enough for compounding to do its magic. So how do you stay wealthy? According to Housel, there are three core principles: frugality, paranoia, and humility. Let's break those down. Frugality doesn't mean you're cheap or living in scarcity. It means you live below your means, even when you don't have to. It's what keeps your lifestyle grounded, regardless of how high your income goes. It's what allows you to weather bad years without panicking. If you're always stretching your lifestyle to match your income, then any downturn, job loss, recession, unexpected expenses can wipe you out. Paranoia sounds negative, but Housel reframes it beautifully. It's about having a healthy respect for risk. It's accepting that no matter how smart or prepared you are, things can go wrong. And when they do, you need buffers, savings, insurance, a plan B. Wealthy people who stay wealthy understand that good times don't last forever. They prepare for the storms before the clouds even show up. And then there's humility. This one's big. It's knowing that you're not as in control as you think you are. It's being okay with not chasing every shiny new opportunity. It's admitting that luck played a role in your success and that the future may not be so generous. A humble investor doesn't try to beat the market every year. They just aim to not lose big. Now, how Housel contrasts these principles with how most of us think about wealth. In American culture especially, we love a good rags to riches story. We glorify bold risk takers. And yes, sometimes they win big. But what we don't often hear about are the silent success stories. People who've stayed wealthy for decades by doing boring, smart, careful things. Think about Warren Buffett again. He's not flashy, he's famously frugal. And his number one rule? Don't lose money. His second rule? Never forget rule number one. That's staying rich in a nutshell. Housel also talks about the importance of a margin of safety. In simple terms, this means don't go all in. Leave some breathing room in your finances. Don't max out your credit. Don't invest everything in one asset. If your budget only works when everything goes perfectly, it's a fragile budget. The real world is messy. Plans fall apart. Unexpected stuff happens. So build in some slack. Another interesting insight: people often look wealthy but aren't actually financially secure. That's because they focus on getting rich, not staying rich. They spend their wealth to prove they have it rather than protect it. But wealth is what you don't see. It's the money not spent, the freedom bought by saying no to lifestyle creep. Housel encourages us to reframe what financial success looks like. It's not about living large. It's about being able to live your life on your terms for a long time. And this mindset shift isn't just for millionaires. It applies to anyone at any income level. Whether you're saving for your first home, investing for retirement, or just trying to make smarter money choices, it's not enough to focus on growing your money. You also have to protect it. So what's the big takeaway from Chapter 5? Getting rich and staying rich are different games, and they require different mindsets. One rewards boldness, the other rewards discipline. The first is about offense. The second is about defense. And if you want lasting wealth, wealth that supports you through all seasons of life, you need both. Make smart bets, yes, but also build safety nets. Take chances, sure, but prepare for setbacks. And above all, respect the unpredictability of life. Because the real financial MVPs aren't the ones who hit home runs. They're the ones who stay in the game, year after year, decade after decade. Chapter 6, Tails You Win. Some events matter way more than others. That's the big idea in Chapter 6. And honestly, it might completely flip the way you think about success, especially financial success. Morgan Housel introduces us to a concept called tail events. If you've never heard that term before, don't worry. It's not as technical as it sounds. In simple terms, tail events are rare, extreme outcomes that have a disproportionately large impact. Think about that one lucky investment that changes your life, or the one bad decision that tanks a whole business. Those are tail events. Now here's where it gets interesting. In finance, these tail events don't just happen. They define everything. Let's use baseball as an analogy, something most Americans can relate to. In baseball, if you get a hit 3 out of 10 times, you're considered a star. That means you're failing 70% of the time. But those few successes, they carry your whole career. Investing works the same way. A handful of big wins can make up for dozens, even hundreds of small failures. How Sell points to some mind-blowing examples to drive this home. Take the stock market. Over the course of decades, just a small fraction of publicly traded companies account for the majority of stock market gains. In fact, studies show that just 4% of stocks have been responsible for nearly all of the market's long-term returns. That's wild, right? So if you were to miss out on just those few winning stocks, your portfolio would look dramatically different. This is why venture capitalists, for example, don't mind having 9 startups fail, as long as the 10th becomes the next Uber. They know that one huge success can carry the entire fund. That's the power of tails. But here's the problem. Most people don't think that way. We expect every effort to produce an equal outcome. We believe in consistency, balance, fairness. But life, especially in the financial world, doesn't work like that. Outcomes are not spread out evenly. They're lopsided, and unless you expect that lopsidedness, you'll be constantly frustrated or confused. How Sell tells a great story about Walt Disney to illustrate this. Did you know that Snow White, released in 1937, almost single-handedly saved the entire Disney company? It was such a massive hit that the profits from just that one movie helped build the Disney empire we know today. One tail event, one hit, and it carried the whole vision forward. The takeaway? Not every effort has to pay off equally. You can try 10 things, fail at 9, and still come out way ahead. But only if you recognize the importance of sticking around long enough to catch the winner. So what does this mean for you and me? First off, it changes how we define failure. If we expect everything we do, every job, every investment, every business idea to be a hit, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment. But if we accept that most things won't work and that's totally okay, we free ourselves up to keep trying. Imagine starting a small business or investing in a few stocks. You might feel discouraged if most of them don't go anywhere. But what if just one of them explodes in value? That one win could outweigh all the losses. That's a tail event. Even your personal life works this way. Think about relationships, job interviews, or creative ideas. You might meet 50 people before you find the one. You might pitch 100 times before you get a yes, but you only need one. That's the beauty of asymmetric outcomes. How Sell also points out that tail events don't just apply to gains. They work on the downside too. Catastrophic failures, once-in-a-century recessions, sudden crashes, these can wipe out years of hard work in a moment. That's why risk management is so important. You can't predict when these events will happen, but you can structure your life and finances to survive them. That means keeping some cash on the side, avoiding too much debt, and not putting all your eggs in one basket. Because if one tail event can build your fortune, another one can tear it down. Now, if you're thinking, well, how do I know which event will be the big one? The truth is, you don't. And that's the point. You can't predict the tails ahead of time, but you can set yourself up to catch them when they come. And that's really the secret sauce of this chapter. Success in life and money isn't about getting it right every time. It's about staying in the game long enough to hit a few home runs. That's it. Stay alive, stay consistent, and keep swinging. This idea also changes how we look at others' success. Sometimes we see someone who's insanely wealthy or wildly successful, and we assume it must be because they're smarter or harder working. And sure, that might be part of it, but more often than not, they were in the right place at the right time, and they stayed in the game long enough to catch a tail event. It doesn't mean they didn't work hard. It just means their one big win might have carried them further than any amount of consistency ever could. So what's the bottom line? Embrace the unevenness. Know that a few things will account for the majority of your progress. Don't beat yourself up if most things don't work out. That's not failure. That's normal. The key is to not give up too soon, because that next attempt, that next idea, investment, connection, or opportunity, that might be the one. Tails win. All you have to do is stay in the game long enough to catch yours. Chapter 7. Freedom. What's the real reason we chase money? Most people will say it's for the stuff. Nice houses, fancy cars, exotic vacations. But Morgan Housel says there's something deeper going on. Something most of us don't say out loud. The real goal, he argues, is freedom. The ability to do what you want, when you want, with the people you want. And when you think about it, that's the most valuable thing money can buy. Let's break this down in a way that hits close to home. Imagine waking up tomorrow with zero obligations. No boss texting you, no meetings on the calendar, no deadlines. You could go for a walk, start your own project, help your community, or just sit outside and enjoy the day. That feeling right there, that's what we're really working for. The ability to control your time. And here's the twist. Housel points out that a lot of people miss this. They earn more money, sure, but they trade away their time and freedom in the process. Promotions come with more responsibility, longer hours, and more pressure. The dream gets replaced by stress. It's like running on a treadmill that speeds up every time you move forward. Before you know it, you're burned out and wondering why you ever wanted more in the first place. Let's say you're working a steady government job, maybe like the instructor role at an ITI or even leading a school like you do in Ranley. It's secure, it's meaningful, and it provides a rhythm to life. Now you start a side hustle, a YouTube channel, maybe about your heritage or music, and suddenly you're building something of your own. Something that doesn't just earn you money, but offers autonomy. That's freedom in motion. It's not about how big your paycheck is, it's about how free you feel at the end of the day. Housel uses a powerful story to illustrate this idea. He talks about a man named Ronald Red, a janitor and gas station attendant who died with more than $8 million in savings. Most people were shocked. How could someone with such a modest job accumulate that kind of wealth? The answer: he lived simply, invested consistently, and let compounding work its magic. But the bigger lesson? He likely had more freedom during his life than many high-income executives because he didn't live to impress others. He lived on his own terms. Contrast that with another story in the book of a tech executive who earned millions but had zero control over his time. Always on call, no weekends off, constant pressure. Sure, he had money, but no peace, no freedom. Housel asks us, who was wealthier? This chapter also challenges the way we think about luxury. In American culture, we often associate wealth with visible success, big homes, luxury SUVs, designer clothes, but those things don't always bring joy. In fact, Housel argues that when you chase status, you often lose the very thing you're trying to gain: independence. And here's a line that hits hard. Controlling your time is the highest dividend money pays. That's worth repeating, because even in a fast-growing region like Arunachal, where traditions and modern life are constantly negotiating space, the value of time remains universal. Whether you're leading a school, starting a bamboo craft business, or preserving tribal culture through content, what you're really buying with your effort isn't just income, it's choice. And that's priceless. Now, Housel isn't saying you need to quit your job or go live off-grid to find freedom. He's saying structure your finances in a way that gives you options. That could mean saving more so you're not living paycheck to paycheck. It could mean living below your means so you're never stuck doing work you hate. Or it could mean starting a side hustle that gives you an exit ramp, just in case. He shares how some of the happiest people aren't the wealthiest. They're the ones with control. Like the person who works 4 days a week and spends Fridays with family, or the retiree who teaches kids carpentry, not because he needs the money, but because he loves the craft, or the entrepreneur who decides what to build, when to build, and who to work with. That's real wealth. Another key point: freedom looks different for everyone. For some, it's not working weekends. For others, it's spending time creating art, farming in the hills, or just being home for dinner. Whatever it is, Housel wants us to identify that version of freedom and aim for it. Not just a big bank balance, he also urges us to be cautious of lifestyle creep, that tendency to spend more as we earn more. It's the enemy of freedom, because the more you spend, the more income you need. And the more income you need, the less flexibility you have. You become chained to the very job or business you hoped would liberate you. So how do you protect your freedom? Start by defining what enough means for you. Not what society says, not what influencers show off. You. Then make decisions that align with that value. Save more than you think you need. Avoid unnecessary debt. Build things that give you leverage, like content, like crafts, like community-based businesses. Because in the end, freedom isn't a luxury, it's a goal worth designing your life around. And the good news? You don't need millions to get there. You just need clarity, intention, and the courage to say no to things that don't serve your version of a free life. And that's a kind of wealth no one can take away. Chapter 8, Man in the Car Paradox. Here's a funny thing about admiration. We spend a ton of money trying to get it, but rarely get it in the way we imagine. This chapter, Man in the Car Paradox, hits on a truth most of us have felt but never quite said out loud. People don't admire you for what you have. They admire themselves in relation to what they see. Think about that guy driving down the street in a brand new Mercedes or a lifted Ford F-250, windows down, music up. What's your first reaction? Be honest. Do you think, wow, that guy is cool? Or do you think, man, I'd love to have that car? Morgan Housel says it straight. When someone drives a nice car, you don't think, wow, that guy's awesome. You think, if I had that car, people would think I'm awesome. That's the paradox. We assume luxury possessions will earn us admiration, but most people are too busy imagining themselves in our shoes to actually admire us. It's not that people don't notice your stuff. They do, but they don't necessarily attribute that stuff to you. They attribute it to themselves. That's the core of the man in the car paradox. You see someone with an expensive watch, a fancy house, or the latest iPhone, and instead of thinking, what a successful person, your brain goes, I wonder what it'd feel like to own that. It's wild how much of our behavior is driven by this invisible pursuit of respect. Not money itself, not happiness, respect. And worse, we think showing off wealth will make others respect us more. But that rarely happens. In fact, it often backfires. People might envy you, sure. But admiration? That's a whole different ballgame. Here's a relatable example. Say someone opens a restaurant in a small town like Rowing or Anini and decorates it with all the flash, neon lights, imported furniture, maybe even a live band. Everyone might go there once just to check it out. But if the food isn't good or the service is bad, that admiration evaporates. What people remember isn't the shine, it's how they felt. That's true respect. And it isn't bought with stuff. It's earned through value, consistency, and character. Housel shares a story about his own past, when he was a teenager and had just gotten his driver's license. He wanted a cool car because he thought that's what would make girls like him. He eventually realized that no one ever cared what kind of car he drove. Most people didn't even notice. That stung, but it was also freeing because once he let go of the idea that external things would bring him internal validation, he started focusing on what really mattered. And here's where this gets even more interesting. If the goal is respect, real, lasting respect, then the best way to get it isn't through flaunting wealth. It's through humility, through being kind, through being dependable, through creating value, through not needing to prove anything. There's a great quote Housel shares from author Nassim Nicholas Taleb. True status comes from not needing to show it. That hits hard, because in a world obsessed with followers, likes, and public displays of success, the quiet confidence of someone who doesn't need to prove anything, that's rare and powerful. We see this in everyday life, too. Think of the elders in tribal communities who walk with quiet authority. They don't wear designer shoes or gold watches. But when they speak, people listen. Their wealth is in their wisdom. Their respect is earned, not bought. And it lasts longer than any luxury item ever could. So what does this mean for us in practical terms? It means stop trying to buy admiration. It doesn't work. Instead, focus on building character. Focus on showing up. On being someone others trust and look up to, not because of what you wear or drive, but because of who you are. It means if you're tempted to buy something flashy just to impress others, pause and ask, do I want this for me? Or do I want this so people will think something about me? If it's the second one, take a breath. That admiration you're chasing, it probably won't land the way you expect. This chapter also reminds us that our desire for admiration is deeply human. We all want to feel important, to be seen, to be valued. That's natural. But the way we go about getting it often takes us further from the real thing. And the solution isn't to stop wanting respect. It's to redefine how we earn it. One of the most liberating financial decisions you can make is to stop trying to impress people. Because once you realize that most people aren't even paying attention to you in the first place, because they're busy thinking about themselves. You free up your energy, your money, and your life. You can invest in things that matter to you. You can build skills, start businesses, raise your family, serve your community, and you can do it all without the pressure to signal success at every turn. So the next time you see someone in a luxury car, remember this paradox. You're not thinking about them, you're thinking about you. And that means the admiration we seek through things is mostly a mirage. The true path to respect, it starts with not needing it, and ironically, that's when it comes. Chapter 9. Wealth is what you don't see. You ever walk through a fancy neighborhood, see those massive houses with luxury cars in the driveway, and think, man, these people must be rich? Well, here's the truth bomb Morgan Housel drops in Chapter 9. That flashy house, that sleek Tesla, those designer clothes, that's not wealth. That's spending. And spending, ironically, is often the enemy of building actual wealth. This chapter, Wealth is What You Don't See, is all about reframing our definition of what it means to be rich versus being wealthy. And spoiler alert, real wealth is invisible. It's in the savings account you don't show off. It's in the investments compounding quietly behind the scenes. It's in the options and freedom that come from money you haven't spent yet. Let's break it down. Imagine you see someone with a brand new Rolex. That's not proof they're wealthy. That's just proof they had enough money to buy a Rolex. The real question is, how much didn't they spend? How much did they save, invest, or set aside for the future? Husserl tells the story of a man who lived in a modest house, drove an old Toyota, and dressed simply. But when he died, he left millions to charity. No one ever suspected he was wealthy because he didn't look wealthy. Meanwhile, someone else could be driving a Range Rover, living in a luxury apartment, wearing Gucci, but be one missed paycheck away from financial disaster. The difference is simple. One was building wealth, the other was spending to signal wealth. And here's where American culture gets tricky. In the US, we're surrounded by signals. Social media, movies, advertisements, they all tell us that success looks like stuff. But the truth is, stuff costs money. And the more you spend to look rich, the less money you actually have to be rich. It's like this. Money spent on a $2,000 handbag isn't money invested in your future. It's gone. It might get you compliments, sure, but it won't get you compounding returns. It won't get you peace of mind. It won't give you freedom. Wealth, Housel argues, is the income you didn't spend. It's the car you didn't buy, the house upgrade you passed on, the vacation you postponed. And it's hard to see, which makes it hard to admire. No one claps for your Roth IRA. No one notices your emergency fund. But those invisible things, that's where the real power lies. Let's take an example close to home. Say someone in Rowing or Itanagar opens a small business and makes good money. They have two choices. Flash that success with gold jewelry, a new bike, and weekly parties, or quietly invest in land, upgrade equipment, or stash away cash for the slow season. The first path looks successful. The second is successful. Housel makes a brilliant point here. Most financial advice focuses on how to build wealth. Invest in stocks, save 20%, avoid debt. But few talk about the mental shift required to want to build wealth. And that shift is this. You have to be okay with not signaling your success. That's hard in a world where so much social currency comes from appearances. But once you realize that wealth is silent and spending is loud, you start to understand why some of the wealthiest people don't look it. Housel talks about a time he visited a wealthy neighborhood and noticed that many of the houses looked relatively modest. These were self-made millionaires, engineers, small business owners, people who lived below their means. They didn't flaunt it, but they were free from debt, free from stress, free from needing to impress anyone. There's another great analogy he uses. Think of wealth like fitness. You don't get strong by flexing in the mirror. You get strong from the reps you don't post. The early morning runs, the skipped desserts, the habits no one sees. Wealth works the same way. It's built in quiet moments of discipline and delayed gratification. Now let's be real. There's nothing wrong with enjoying your money. Housel doesn't say never spend. What he says is spend with intention, not for attention. If a new pair of sneakers makes you genuinely happy, go for it. But don't buy them thinking it'll earn you admiration. That's a losing game, because admiration from spending is shallow and fleeting. True respect comes from how you live, not what you wear. So how do you apply this in your life? First, start tracking what you don't spend. Sounds weird, right? But it's a powerful mindset shift. Each time you pass on an impulse buy or delay a purchase, celebrate it. That's wealth, right there. Second, normalize modesty. Teach your kids, your friends, your employees, especially in tribal communities where traditions already value humility, that it's okay to not flash your success. In fact, that's often a sign you're doing things right. And finally, redefine your goals. If your dream is to get rich, ask yourself, what does that actually mean? More often than not, it means freedom, security, control over your time. And those things come from what you don't see, not from what you post on Instagram. So the next time you catch yourself admiring someone's outward display of wealth, pause. Ask, what don't I see? And more importantly, what do I want my wealth to do for me? Because in the end, the real flex, it's not the car, it's not the house. It's waking up every morning knowing you're financially secure and not needing to prove it to anyone. Chapter 10, Save Money. Here's a truth that doesn't make headlines. Saving money is way more important than most people think. Not glamorous, not flashy, but it's the unsung hero of personal finance. In Chapter 10 of The Psychology of Money, Morgan Housel cuts through all the noise about investment strategies, interest rates, or beating the market and gets straight to the point. If you want to build wealth, you have to save. You don't need a six-figure salary. You don't need to be the next Warren Buffett. You just need to live below your means and consistently put money away. Sounds simple, right? But the simplicity is exactly why it's so powerful and why so many people overlook it. Let's get into the heart of what Housel is saying. Most people believe that the only way to get rich is to earn a lot or get really good at investing. But those are just pieces of the puzzle. Earning helps, sure. Investing helps, absolutely. But without saving, neither of those matters. If you spend everything you make, it doesn't matter how big your paycheck is. That money's gone before it has a chance to work for you. Now here's the kicker. Saving is totally within your control. You can't always control your income. Your job may change. Your industry might shift. You can't control the market. Stocks go up and down. But you can control your spending. You can decide to save more than you spend. That's your superpower. Housel compares saving to taking a deep breath. It's preparation, it's patience, it's strength, and it builds a cushion between you and life's unexpected curveballs. Think about that for a second. What happens when your car breaks down, or you lose your job, or you get hit with an emergency medical bill? If you've been saving consistently, it's no big deal. You've got a buffer. But if you've been living paycheck to paycheck, even if that paycheck is big, you're suddenly in crisis mode. Housel calls this flexibility. Saving gives you the ability to say no when others say yes. It lets you walk away from a toxic job, take a risk on a new venture, or support a loved one without it wrecking your finances. That kind of freedom is priceless. And get this, you don't need a reason to save. Most people think saving should be for a specific goal: college tuition, a down payment, retirement. And yes, those are great reasons. But you can also save just to save, to be prepared, to breathe easier. That's valid too. Here's a story Housel shares that drives the point home. He talks about a friend who lived a very average lifestyle. Middle-class job, modest home, used car, nothing fancy. But one day that friend revealed he had quietly saved up a massive emergency fund. Years of living expenses. No debt, complete freedom. And this wasn't from earning millions. It was from being intentional and disciplined with what he had. Compare that to someone who earns twice as much, but is always broke because they're trying to keep up with neighbors or chase status. Who do you think is really wealthier? Here's the tough part for many people. Saving often feels like a sacrifice, like you're giving something up. But Housel flips that idea on its head. He says saving is the opposite of sacrifice. It's the ability to say yes to future opportunities. It's buying yourself options, time, and peace of mind. That's not a loss. That's a win. Let's bring this into an American context. Think about the pressure to upgrade. New iPhone every year, bigger house, better car, designer clothes. All of it screams success in the short term. But it's also where so many Americans get stuck. They earn more, so they spend more. The lifestyle inflation treadmill is real, and it keeps people from ever getting ahead. But saving breaks that cycle. When you save, you're not chasing status. You're building stability. You're saying, I care more about my future than impressing someone today. One of Housel's best insights is that building wealth has little to do with your income and everything to do with your behavior. And saving is all about behavior. It's about patience, long-term thinking, and resisting the urge to flex every time your paycheck hits. Another point he makes is about expectations. If you can keep your expectations modest, even as your income grows, you'll naturally save more. If you're always chasing the next big thing, you'll never have enough. But if you're content with what you have, you can channel the extra into savings and watch your freedom grow. And here's where the magic of compounding comes in. Saving a few $100s a month might not sound like much, but over time, with consistent effort and some smart investing, it can snowball into real wealth. Not overnight, but gradually, steadily, quietly. So what's the takeaway? Don't get caught up in the race to earn more or find the perfect investment strategy. Start with saving, build the habit, make it automatic, make it non-negotiable. Because once you start saving consistently, you give yourself the most powerful financial tool there is: options. Save even when you don't have a goal. Save because life is unpredictable. Save because it gives you power. And save because true wealth isn't just about how much you make. It's about how much you keep. And in a world obsessed with spending, that's a quiet rebellion worth starting. Chapter 11. Reasonable greater than rational. When it comes to money, most of us assume we should aim to be perfectly rational. You know, like a spreadsheet, calculate the numbers, weigh the pros and cons, maximize returns, minimize losses. But in this chapter of The Psychology of Money, Morgan Housel challenges that idea head on. He says being reasonable beats being rational every single time. Sounds weird, right? But hear him out. Rational is about cold logic. It's what an economist or computer would do, pure optimization. Reasonable, on the other hand, is about what actually works for you in real life, with all your emotions, habits, and imperfections in the mix. And when it comes to managing your money, that's a big deal. Because let's face it, we're not robots. Let's start with an example Housel gives: paying off a mortgage early. Mathematically, that's often not the smartest thing to do. Why? Because mortgage rates are typically low, and that money could probably earn more in the stock market. A rational person would invest instead of paying down the loan. But millions of people do pay off their mortgage early. Why? Because it makes them feel safe. It gives them peace of mind. It helps them sleep better at night. And you know what? That's totally reasonable. Even if it's not technically optimal, it's emotionally sustainable. That matters more. Housel isn't saying we should ignore the math. Far from it. But he is saying we should design our financial strategies around our personalities, not just around numbers. A money plan is only as good as your ability to stick with it over the long run. And if being rational makes you anxious, scared, or uncertain, you probably won't stick with it. Take investing. The rational investor might try to squeeze every last percentage point of return by chasing the hottest stocks or timing the market. But that strategy often leads to emotional decision-making, buying high out of excitement, selling low out of fear. A reasonable investor, on the other hand, might just set up automatic contributions to a low-cost index fund and ignore the noise. Not the flashiest move, but far more likely to succeed over time. This chapter is really about respecting human nature. We all have fears, insecurities, hopes, and dreams tied up in our money decisions. And pretending those emotions don't exist is like trying to hold your breath underwater forever. It's just not going to work. Let's bring this home with something super relatable in American culture: retirement planning. Financial advisors will often tell you exactly how much you should be saving every month, based on compound interest charts and future projections. Rationally, the numbers make sense. But life isn't lived on a graph. You've got birthdays, kids' activities, family trips, medical bills, real stuff. So instead of beating yourself up for not hitting the perfect number, it's way more useful to ask, what's a savings plan I can realistically follow every single month, even when life gets messy? Being reasonable helps you create systems that work in real life, not just on paper. Now, this idea can feel counterintuitive, especially in a culture that praises data-driven decisions and perfect optimization. But here's something important. Housel points out, long-term success doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from being consistent, and consistency is driven by behavior, not spreadsheets. Think about dieting. The most effective diet isn't the one that cuts the most calories. It's the one you can actually follow. Same goes with money. The best financial plan isn't the one with the highest theoretical return. It's the one you can live with. It's the one that fits into your habits, your beliefs, and your lifestyle. Husserl also talks about how risk tolerance plays into this. People have wildly different attitudes toward risk, and that affects how they invest. For example, someone might feel way too stressed holding stocks during a market crash. Rationally, they know the market will probably bounce back, but emotionally, they just can't handle it. A reasonable approach for them might be to keep more money in bonds or cash. It might not be the highest return portfolio, but it's the one that won't keep them up at night. And you know what? That peace of mind is worth a lot more than a couple of extra percentage points. Another great example Housel gives is about emergency funds. Rationally, keeping a big chunk of cash sitting in a savings account that earns less than 1% seems like a waste. But if that emergency fund keeps you from going into credit card debt when your car breaks down or you lose your job, it's actually a genius move. It's reasonable. It keeps you safe. So what's the big takeaway from this chapter? Perfection isn't the goal. Sustainability is. You want a financial life you can maintain through good times and bad, one that keeps you calm, confident, and in control. That might mean making decisions that don't look great on a calculator, but feel right for you and your family. That might mean ignoring hot tips from friends, resisting flashy investment schemes, or even choosing to rent instead of buy because you value flexibility. Bottom line, if your financial plan makes you miserable, it's not a good plan. If it stresses you out or feels like a constant struggle, you won't stick with it. And if you won't stick with it, it doesn't matter how smart it is. So give yourself permission to be human. Make money decisions that are smart enough and feel right. Be reasonable. It's not just okay, it's the key to long-term success. Chapter 12. Surprise. If there's one thing that keeps money interesting, and at times terrifying, it's this. The biggest financial events, both good and bad, are almost always surprises. That's the heart of Chapter 12 of The Psychology of Money. And Morgan Housel doesn't just suggest that surprises happen, he shows how they define the financial world. Let's start with the big one, World War II. Think about how much that war shaped the global economy. It pulled the U.S. out of the Great Depression, created millions of jobs, launched entire industries, and ultimately led to decades of growth. And yet, no one saw it coming. People were worried about economic recovery, not a full-blown global conflict. But boom, one of the most unpredictable and devastating events in modern history hit, and everything changed. Housel uses this to hammer home a critical point. Financial history is shaped not by the things we expect, but by the stuff we don't. And if that's true, if our biggest financial turning points are surprises, then trying to predict the future with charts and forecasts starts to look kind of silly. Let's make it personal. Think about the 2008 housing crash. It caught Wall Street, Main Street, and just about every expert off guard. Banks collapsed. People lost their homes. Retirement accounts were cut in half overnight. Everyone was asking, why didn't we see this coming? But the truth is, no one ever sees it coming. The signs are usually only obvious in hindsight, and that's what makes surprises so dangerous. They blindside us. They don't show up in spreadsheets. And here's where Housel flips the script. He says the surprise isn't the surprise. The real surprise is thinking the future will look anything like the past. It's like driving while only looking in the rearview mirror. Sure, it tells you where you've been, but it won't warn you about the deer about to jump into the road ahead. Housel even mentions how economists and investors love to create models to forecast the market. They look backward at what's happened and try to project it forward. But life isn't linear. Technology changes. Policies shift. Pandemics hit. New inventions emerge. One little curveball can throw those tidy models into chaos. Just look at COVID-19. Practically overnight, the world economy shut down. Unemployment skyrocketed. Entire industries went dark. And yet the stock market bounced back faster than anyone expected, fueled in part by Zoom, remote work, and massive stimulus packages. No one predicted it, but it happened. The truth is, financial planning requires humility. You have to admit, I don't know what's coming, and neither does anyone else. That's not to say you shouldn't plan. You should. But your plan needs flexibility. It needs room for the unknown. And that leads to one of the chapter's big takeaways. The most important part of every plan is planning on your plan not going according to plan. Seriously, read that again. Because that's life, right? Maybe you lose your job. Maybe you get a health scare. Maybe the business you started doesn't take off the way you hoped. Or maybe it explodes in popularity and you have to scale faster than you expected. Either way, surprises are coming. The question is, will you be ready to adapt? In this chapter, Hosel makes the case for something that might sound old-fashioned. Margin. That's financial wiggle room. Space between what could happen and what you need to happen. It's why emergency funds matter. It's why living below your means is a superpower. It's why debt, even when manageable, can still be risky. Because if history teaches us anything, it's that stability is temporary. Calm is temporary. Predictability is temporary. The unexpected is always lurking just around the corner. And sometimes those surprises are good. Hosel points to the rise of personal computing as an example. No one in the 1950s or even the 1970s thought that one day people would carry pocket-sized supercomputers, aka smartphones, and run entire businesses from their homes. But that innovation changed everything, from how we shop, to how we communicate, to how we invest. The people who were open to surprises, who embraced change, were the ones who benefited the most. So how do we apply this to our own money lives? First, stop trying to predict everything. Instead, prepare for anything. Build in a buffer. Don't just save for retirement, save for what-ifs. Second, don't base your financial decisions solely on historical data. The past is helpful, sure, but it's not a roadmap. It's a rearview mirror. The road ahead could look very different. Third, protect yourself against the downside while staying open to the upside. That means insurance. That means emergency savings. That means avoiding risky bets that could ruin you, even if they look good on paper. And finally, embrace humility. Understand that even the smartest investors in the world get surprised. Warren Buffett didn't predict the dot-com boom. He didn't predict 2008. He didn't predict COVID-19. But what makes Buffett great isn't his ability to predict. It's his ability to endure, to stay in the game, to adapt when the rules change. Hosel's message is clear. The future will surprise you. Financial success doesn't come from knowing what will happen. It comes from being ready for whatever does. In a world where surprises rule the game, resilience beats brilliance every time. Chapter 13, Room for Error. Let's talk about something that doesn't get nearly enough attention in the world of personal finance. Wiggle room. You know, that buffer zone you build into your plans so that when life throws a wrench in your gears, because it will, you don't go completely off track. That's what Chapter 13 of The Psychology of Money is all about. Room for error. Morgan Housel begins with a simple idea. Most people assume the world is more predictable than it really is. We love forecasts, plans, spreadsheets, and projections. And sure, those are helpful until they're not, because all it takes is one unexpected expense, one market dip, one personal emergency, and boom, your perfect plan is toast. Let's say you're planning for retirement. You run the numbers. You've got it all figured out. How much to invest, what returns to expect, when to retire, and how much you'll need to live on. But what if inflation runs higher than expected? What if you have a medical issue in your 60s? What if your kid needs help with college or life throws you a curveball you didn't see coming? That's where room for error saves you. Housel argues that having room for error isn't pessimism, it's realism. Take engineers, for example. When they build a bridge, they don't design it to carry exactly the expected load. No, they design it to handle much more than what's expected. A bridge that just barely holds up under normal traffic is a disaster waiting to happen. So they build in margin. Extra support, flexibility. Why? Because things go wrong. Trucks get heavier, weather gets harsher, materials age. Money works the same way. You have to plan for things to go a little wrong, not because you expect them to, but because they can. Housel tells the story of Benjamin Graham, Warren Buffett's mentor and author of The Intelligent Investor. Graham's big idea was what he called the margin of safety. It was his investing North Star. Basically, don't just look for good opportunities, look for great ones with a built-in cushion. If you're buying a stock, don't buy it at fair value. Buy it at a discount. That way, even if your assumptions are off or something unexpected happens, you've got some padding. You won't get wiped out. The same principle applies to your personal finances. Let's say your monthly expenses are $3,000. You earn $3,200. Technically, you're fine, right? But one missed paycheck, one unexpected car repair, or a spike in rent, and suddenly you're underwater. But if you were living on $2,500 and saving the rest, that's room for error. That's your financial bridge being built to handle more than just day-to-day traffic. Here's another way Housel frames it. Room for error is what turns chaos into inconvenience. Without it, small disruptions become full-blown emergencies. With it, those same disruptions are just annoyances. There's a powerful sense of peace that comes from knowing you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to predict the future precisely. You don't have to be right all the time. You just have to give yourself the flexibility to be a little wrong without everything falling apart. Let's talk about investors for a second. Housel points out that some of the best investors in history didn't always make the smartest moves. They just made sure they survived long enough to benefit from the market's long-term upward trend. That means keeping a healthy cash cushion, not going all in on a single bet, avoiding leverage unless it's absolutely necessary, basically giving yourself the space to mess up without getting wiped out. This mindset doesn't just apply to investing, it's useful in every part of your financial life. Want to start a business? Build room for error into your budget, because odds are your revenue won't ramp up as fast as you hope. Buying a home? Don't stretch your budget to the max. Leave space for repairs, property taxes, rising interest rates. Saving for college? Assume tuition might be more than you think. Room for error is like a secret ingredient that makes everything a little less stressful. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Housel connects room for error to confidence. The more cushion you have, the more calmly you can make decisions. You're not reacting out of panic. You're not forced to take a job you hate because your savings ran dry. You're not stuck in a toxic situation because you can't afford to leave. Room for error gives you the freedom to breathe, to think clearly, to live intentionally. It's also a powerful antidote to overconfidence. We've all met that person who thinks they've got it all figured out. They invest aggressively, they spend like there's no tomorrow, they assume nothing will ever go wrong. But Housel warns, the most dangerous financial position is being highly confident and just barely right. Being barely right is not good enough when your future is riding on the outcome. So how do you build room for error into your life? Here are some simple, practical ways. Save more than you think you need. Keep your fixed costs low. Avoid debt where possible. Don't assume the best-case scenario. Plan for the average or even a bit worse. Diversify your income and investments. When you succeed, stay humble. When you fail, make sure it's not fatal. The bottom line? In a world that's unpredictable, where luck and risk are always in play, room for error is your financial seatbelt. You hope you'll never need it, but you'll be glad it's there when you do. Because the truth is, life doesn't give warnings. And in the long game of money, survival isn't just important, it's everything. Chapter 14, You'll Change. Here's something that most financial plans and retirement goals don't account for. And it's a big one. You're going to change. Not just a little. Not just your haircut or your favorite TV shows. Your values, your goals, your priorities, even your definition of success. These things will shift. And that's what Morgan Housel dives into in Chapter 14. You'll change. Let's start with a truth we rarely say out loud. When we make financial decisions, like choosing a career, buying a home, or investing for retirement, we often assume that our future self will want the same things we want today. But more often than not, they don't. Your future self is kind of like a stranger. You think you know them, but they're going to surprise you. Husserl uses the idea of an end-of-history illusion. It's this psychological phenomenon where people can look back and clearly see how much they've changed over the last 10 years. But they somehow believe the next 10 years won't bring much change. It's like saying, yeah, I've totally grown and evolved, but now I'm exactly who I'll be forever. Spoiler alert, you're not. Imagine your 20-year-old self. Think about what mattered to you then, the music you loved, the people you admired, what you wanted out of life. Now think about how much of that changed by the time you were 30 or 40. Your financial needs, your emotional wants, even your idea of what makes a good life likely shifted. So here's the trap. When we lock ourselves into long-term financial decisions based on short-term emotions or temporary goals, we risk building a future that our future self might not even want. For example, maybe in your 20s, you wanted to retire at 40, travel the world and live in a van. So you hustled hard, invested aggressively, and lived lean. But by 40, you've got kids, or your back hurts just thinking about van life. Suddenly, what once felt like freedom now feels exhausting. This doesn't mean you were wrong back then. It just means you changed. And that's okay. In fact, it's normal, but you've got to leave space in your financial life for those changes. Housel shares how, when he was younger, he was obsessed with becoming a high-flying investment banker. Big money, big status. But after just one internship in the field, he realized the lifestyle wasn't for him. What looked glamorous from the outside felt soul-sucking from the inside. He pivoted. That moment, recognizing change and adjusting, was a huge financial and personal win. So how do we build financial lives that honor the fact that we're going to evolve? One word: flexibility. Instead of locking into rigid goals like retiring at a specific age or buying your forever home at 32, try building wealth in a way that gives you options. Make choices that don't trap you. If you have the choice to change your mind, you hold power. That's worth more than any dollar amount. Let's say you dream of early retirement. Great. But instead of pouring every cent into a 401k that you can't touch until you're 59 and a half, you also build a brokerage account. You keep cash reserves. Maybe you invest in skills that open new career doors later. That's flexibility. That's preparing for a version of you that might wake up one day and say, actually, I'd rather teach high school chemistry than sip pina coladas in Bali. Another trap Housel warns about is envy. We often shape our goals by looking at what other people are doing. Your coworker bought a big house. Maybe you should too. Your cousin's crypto portfolio is booming. Maybe you're missing out. But what if that big house makes you feel financially stuck in 5 years? What if the crypto gamble doesn't align with your long-term peace of mind? You need to make financial decisions for the future you, not the version of you that's trying to impress someone on Instagram. Housel also encourages readers to stop beating themselves up for changing. We've been conditioned to believe that consistency equals integrity, that changing your goals means you're flaky. But that's not true. Changing is growth. It's wisdom. It means you're paying attention. And when you understand that your future self is going to want different things, you also start to forgive your past self. Maybe you spent too much in your 20s. Maybe you didn't invest as early as you could have. That's okay. You were making the best decision with what you knew at the time. So what's the takeaway? It's this. Build a financial life with room to pivot. Save not just for specific goals, but for flexibility. Make peace with the fact that you might walk away from a career you once loved. You might sell the dream house. You might crave new experiences, deeper relationships, or slower days. Because the biggest financial risk isn't volatility, it's rigidity. When you tie your identity to a single version of success, it's hard to let go, even when that version no longer fits. Think of money like a toolbox, not a finish line. The more tools you have, the more you can adapt to life as it unfolds. And trust me, it's going to unfold in ways you never expected. So don't just save for what you want now. Save for what you might want later. Give yourself options. Give your future self some breathing room. After all, they're going to be different from who you are today. And that's not just okay. That's the plan. Chapter 15. Nothing's free. Every financial decision we make comes with a price. And no, we're not just talking about dollars and cents. In Chapter 15 of The Psychology of Money, Morgan Housel reminds us of a hard truth. Nothing's free. Even if you can't see the cost right away, it's there, in the form of stress, risk, uncertainty, regret, or missed opportunities. You might not be writing a check, but you're definitely paying for it. Let's take investing, for instance. We all love the idea of buy low, sell high, right? Just park your money in the market and watch it grow. Easy. But if that were truly free money, everyone would be rich. The real cost of investing isn't the transaction fee. It's the emotional toll. It's the gut-wrenching volatility, the sleepless nights during market crashes, the discipline to stay invested when everything in the news is telling you to run. That fear, that discomfort, that's the fee. Not a fine, not a punishment. A fee, a price you pay for the privilege of earning long-term returns. Husserl compares it to a Disney World ticket. You're not surprised when you're charged $150 to enter the park. You accept that as the cost of enjoying the experience. But in finance, when the cost comes in the form of a downturn or emotional stress, we act like something unfair is happening. Like we've been cheated. But volatility, uncertainty, that's the price of admission to building wealth. Now here's the key difference between a fine and a fee. A fine is something you pay when you do something wrong, like a speeding ticket. A fee is what you pay to get something of value, like buying a concert ticket. Husserl argues that market volatility is a fee, not a fine. But we treat it like a fine. We punish ourselves for experiencing it. We think this shouldn't be happening, and we bail. But that emotional discomfort is actually the entrance fee to the roller coaster of long-term investing. Let's say you're saving for retirement. Over decades, your portfolio could go through several recessions, crashes, corrections. In each one, it'll feel like the world is ending. But if you hang on, if you keep paying that emotional fee, you're rewarded with growth. The problem? Most people want the reward without the ride. We want the returns without the chaos. But markets don't work that way. And it's not just investing. Think about buying a home. The house might be beautiful, the mortgage rate low, but the real price includes upkeep stress, property taxes, unexpected repairs, and that constant background anxiety about interest rates and market timing. That's stress. That's part of the price. Same goes for careers. High salaries often come with long hours, demanding bosses, missed family time. The paycheck isn't free. The question is, are you willing to pay the real cost of that paycheck? Husserl urges us to start recognizing these hidden costs and to be okay with them. When we acknowledge that nothing is free, we stop being surprised by the emotional toll. And when you expect to pay the fee, you're more likely to hang in there long enough to see the payoff. Here's a story he shares. In the 1990s, legendary investor Peter Lynch managed the Fidelity Magellan Fund, which delivered outstanding returns. But most people who invested in the fund actually lost money. Why? Because they panicked during market dips and pulled out at the worst times. They didn't want to pay the fee. They thought volatility was a sign that something was wrong, instead of recognizing it as the cost of the returns they were chasing. This is why people bail out at the worst possible moments, during crashes, corrections, bad headlines. But here's the deal. The fee doesn't go away just because you ignore it. You still pay. But instead of paying through emotional endurance and reaping long-term rewards, you pay through missed opportunity, through panic selling, through regret. There's a broader life lesson here too. Every yes you say in life is a no to something else. Want to be an entrepreneur? The fee might be uncertainty, long hours, financial risk. Want a stable 9 to 5? That fee might be giving up autonomy or flexibility. Want to stay in your hometown to be close to family? The fee could be missing out on career opportunities elsewhere. Every choice comes with a price tag. The key is to choose the right fees, not the lowest fees, the right ones. Ask yourself, what kind of stress, sacrifice, or uncertainty am I willing to live with? What am I willing to trade for long-term peace, purpose, or growth? Because here's the truth. There's no such thing as a perfect financial plan or a perfect life plan. But there is such a thing as being emotionally prepared for the cost of your choices. So instead of running from discomfort, accept it as part of the process. When the market dips, instead of thinking, oh no, this is terrible, try thinking, here's the fee. I expected this. I've budgeted for this emotionally and financially. And that mindset shift, that's where the magic happens. Because if you can learn to pay the fee instead of avoiding it, you open the door to long-term financial success. So whether you're investing, starting a business, or planning for the future, remember, the biggest mistake isn't paying the price. It's pretending the price doesn't exist. Nothing's free. But that's not bad news. That's just how it works. Chapter 16, You and Me. When it comes to money, it's easy to look at someone else's choices and think, what on earth were they thinking? But in Chapter 16 of The Psychology of Money, Morgan Housel offers a powerful reminder. What makes perfect sense for one person might be totally irrational for another. And that's okay. We all play different financial games. And the biggest mistake we can make? Thinking everyone is playing the same one. Picture this. You're scrolling through your phone and see a headline about someone panic selling all their stocks during a market dip. You might scoff and think, that's dumb. Don't they know the market always rebounds? But here's what you don't see. Maybe that person is 65, about to retire, and can't afford a 30% drop. Their game is about preserving capital, not maximizing growth. Meanwhile, you're 35, stacking a 401k, and have decades to ride the ups and downs. Different timelines, different games. The problem, Housel explains, is that we often make decisions or form opinions based on someone else's context, not our own. And when we do that, we either copy moves that don't suit us or judge others unfairly for playing their game, not ours. Let's go deeper with an example from the book. Day traders versus long-term investors. A day trader might flip stocks by the hour, chasing micro movements in price. To them, volatility is opportunity. But for a long-term investor who checks their portfolio once a quarter, that kind of behavior looks insane. On the flip side, the long-term investor's buy and hold approach seems foolishly slow to the day trader. But here's the truth. Both are valid if they match the person's goals and risk tolerance. This misunderstanding is everywhere. Media headlines hype market movements that seem urgent and dramatic, but they often reflect the actions of short-term players. The problem? Most of us absorb that noise even if we're not playing that game. We end up reacting to things that don't even apply to us. It's like watching highlights from a poker tournament and changing your retirement plan because of it. One of the most impactful stories Housel shares is about the 2008 financial crisis. Many homeowners bought houses they couldn't really afford, using risky loans and low down payments. From the outside, that looked irresponsible. But in their eyes, housing prices had always gone up, and renting felt like throwing money away. Their decisions weren't necessarily dumb. They were based on the best information they had at the time, the stories they believed, and the financial culture they lived in. That's a huge lesson right there. People make decisions based on their own personal experiences with money, not on cold, rational theory. Someone who grew up in a financially unstable home might hoard cash because they fear scarcity. Someone who came of age during a long bull market might be more comfortable with risk. And someone who's never been burned by a recession might think the market only goes up. That's not stupidity, that's psychology. Another key idea in this chapter is that you can't judge someone's choices without knowing their timeline. Housel talks about how venture capitalists operate very differently than public investors. A VC might be happy losing money 9 times out of 10 as long as the 10th investment becomes the next Google. A retiree, on the other hand, can't afford that kind of failure rate. So again, same market, wildly different approaches. This insight applies to personal finance too. Ever wonder why someone leases a flashy car instead of investing that money? Or why someone stuffs all their cash under the mattress instead of putting it in the market? It might seem irrational to you, but it could feel safe, secure, or even smart to them, based on their experiences, beliefs, and priorities. And here's where it gets real. We don't just misinterpret other people. We often misinterpret ourselves. We copy strategies from people online, in books, or in our friend group, assuming that if it worked for them, it'll work for us. But unless their life, goals, and psychology are exactly like yours, that logic doesn't hold. Housel says it best. Beware taking financial cues from people playing a different game than you, because their risk tolerance isn't your risk tolerance. Their goals aren't your goals. Their fears aren't your fears. So what do we do with this knowledge? First, we give others more grace. Instead of rushing to judge someone's financial choices, we pause and remember, we're not in their shoes. We don't know their full story. That creates space for empathy, not arrogance. Second, we get brutally honest about the game we're playing. Are you trying to build wealth over decades? Preserve capital for retirement? Pay off debt as fast as possible? Buy a home in 5 years? Your strategy should reflect that, not the hot tip your coworker mentioned or what the latest YouTube finance guru is doing. Third, we tune out the noise that doesn't match our game. That means ignoring short-term stock forecasts if you're a long-term investor, or skipping housing market drama if you're locked into a 30-year mortgage with no plans to sell. Not every headline is your headline. At the end of the day, money isn't just math. It's deeply personal. And the more we understand that, the better our choices become. We stop copying. We stop judging. We start playing our own game with clarity and confidence. Because when it comes to money, one size never fits all. Chapter 17, The Seduction of Pessimism. Pessimism has a strange magnetic pull. It sounds wise, mature, even intelligent. When someone confidently says, the market's going to crash, or this is all going to end badly, we perk up. We lean in. Why? Because pessimism feels like someone's looking out for us. It sounds like caution, like adulting. But in Chapter 17 of The Psychology of Money, Morgan Housel unpacks a hard truth. Pessimism may feel smart, but it's often misleading. Think about it. Optimism sounds like sales. It's hopeful, maybe even naive. But pessimism, it has gravitas. It's the person at the party telling you that everything's about to collapse. And somehow they seem like the only one who gets it. We give pessimism more weight than optimism, even though, historically, things tend to get better over time. Let's take a real-world example. The Great Recession in 2008. The crash was brutal. People lost homes, jobs, and life savings. If you had listened to the doom and gloom crowd back then, you might have pulled your money out of the market, bought gold, and waited for the next apocalypse. But guess what? From 2009 onward, the S&P 500 saw one of the greatest bull runs in history. Those who stayed invested, or better yet, kept investing, came out way ahead. But in the moment, optimism looked foolish. Pessimism was persuasive. It always is. Housel points out that pessimism grabs our attention because loss looms larger than gain. Psychologists call this loss aversion. The idea that losing $100 feels worse than gaining $100 feels good. This hardwired emotional bias makes us hypersensitive to bad news. So when someone sounds the alarm, even if their warning isn't grounded in probability, we take it seriously. Let's look at tech. For decades, people have warned that innovation is leading to job loss, privacy destruction, and social breakdown. Are those concerns real? Absolutely. But while people were worrying, technology also created entire new industries, connected billions of people, and lifted millions out of poverty. Yet the headlines that stick are the scary ones. You probably don't remember the article titled, "Steady Economic Growth Continues." But you remember the one screaming, "Recession looms, are you ready?" That's the seduction of pessimism. It hijacks our attention. Housel shares a compelling example from a man named Mark Andreessen, a Silicon Valley legend. He once said something along the lines of, "The world is improving, but people think it's getting worse, because bad news gets more attention than good news." It's true, progress is slow. Peace, health improvements, rising living standards, these things don't shout. But disasters, pandemics, financial meltdowns, they scream. So that's what we hear. Another key point in this chapter is that optimism doesn't mean denying problems. It means believing in solutions. Hussell explains that optimists understand setbacks happen, but they believe they can be overcome. It's not blind faith. It's an understanding that history shows us problems tend to get solved over time. Think about airplanes. In the early days of aviation, crashes were terrifyingly common. Every time there was an accident, pessimists cried, "We're not ready for flight." But engineers didn't stop. They fixed one problem at a time. And now flying is safer than driving. The optimists weren't ignoring the risks. They were just confident that improvement was possible. This mindset applies directly to your money. When markets fall, pessimists shout, "This time it's different." They see downturns as the beginning of the end. But long-term investors, optimists, see them as part of the cycle, a buying opportunity, a chance to stay the course. Hussell also dives into how we confuse pessimism for realism, especially in finance. The future is uncertain, so the person who paints it as dark and stormy often sounds more credible than the person who says, "Things will probably work out." But here's the thing. While pessimism sounds like realism, it often ignores how resilient humans can be, how adaptable markets are, how quickly innovation moves. It's not just individuals who fall for this. Media outlets thrive on pessimism. Why? Because fear sells. Outlets need your clicks, and a headline that screams doom is far more clickable than one that calmly reports progress. It creates a constant stream of negativity that can warp your worldview if you're not careful. So what can we do? First, recognize the emotional pull of pessimism. It's not about ignoring warnings or denying problems. It's about staying grounded. Ask yourself, is this person selling fear? Are they offering real solutions or just stoking anxiety? Second, train yourself to notice progress. Look for signs of growth in your own life, in your investments, in the world. Read books or follow thinkers who balance realism with hope. Make optimism a habit. Third, remember that long-term progress doesn't mean smooth sailing. Housel uses a brilliant metaphor. Like an airplane flight with turbulence, the journey to long-term wealth involves dips and bumps, but the destination is still forward. Optimists keep flying, pessimists want to jump out midair. Ultimately, this chapter is about mindset. Pessimism may feel smart in the short term, but over the long haul, optimism wins. It's not naive. It's not childish. It's courageous. Because believing in the future, especially when things look rough, is what keeps the world moving and your wealth growing. So the next time someone tries to impress you with doom and gloom, pause, nod politely, then smile, and keep building. Chapter 18, When You'll Believe Anything. We all love a good story. From ancient myths to Hollywood blockbusters, humans are wired to find meaning in narratives. But in Chapter 18 of The Psychology of Money, Morgan Housel explores the darker side of our love for stories, especially when it comes to money. He shows how our need to make sense of the world often leads us to believe things that just aren't true. Not because we're foolish, but because our brains crave explanations, even when randomness is really what's at play. Let's start with a familiar example, the stock market. Imagine the market crashes 10% in a single day. Turn on the news and you'll instantly hear a dozen experts explain exactly why it happened. Interest rates, political tension, inflation, unemployment numbers. Take your pick. Each explanation sounds convincing. But here's the kicker. Most of these stories are built after the fact. The truth is, markets are chaotic. They move for a million reasons, many of which are invisible, emotional, or completely random. But randomness doesn't sit well with us, so we invent a story to make sense of it. Hussell tells us about the 2008 financial crisis. In the years that followed, books and documentaries did a great job breaking down the causes: subprime lending, bad incentives, toxic financial products. All true, but what people often forget is that before 2008, most folks didn't see the collapse coming. In hindsight, it's easy to connect the dots. But during the buildup, the signs were blurry. We're just better at crafting stories after we know the outcome. That's the power of hindsight bias, and it tricks us into thinking we understand more than we really do. This desire for clarity creates a dangerous pattern. We create simple stories for complex realities. Think about it like this. You're driving through a dense fog. You can barely see what's ahead, but once you're past it, you look in the rearview mirror and everything's clear. That's what hindsight does to our understanding of financial events. It makes the unpredictable seem obvious in retrospect. Now, this isn't just about economics or investing, it's human nature. When something unexpected happens, we scramble to explain it. The housing market crashes, we blame greedy bankers. A startup becomes a billion-dollar company, we credit the genius of the founder. But often, luck and timing play just as big a role. That doesn't fit neatly into a story, though, so we downplay it. We'd rather believe in clean, simple cause and effect. Husserl uses the example of Bill Gates and Microsoft. Gates was brilliant, no doubt, but he also happened to attend one of the only high schools in the world with a computer terminal in 1968. That gave him a head start. If you replace that small detail with another kid in another school, maybe it's a different name on Windows today. But we like stories with heroes, so we focus on Gates's genius and ignore the role of chance. And when we tell these kinds of stories about success, failure, wealth, we often do it to make ourselves feel better. If someone made a fortune, we assume it was because they worked harder or smarter or took the right risks. That gives us a sense of control. It reassures us that if we do the same, we'll get the same result. But real life is messier than that. Two people can do the same things and end up in wildly different places just because of luck, timing, or circumstances beyond their control. It gets even trickier when we talk about ourselves. Ever catch yourself trying to explain why your investment worked out or didn't? Maybe you tell yourself you were smart to buy Apple stock or clever for selling before the crash. But was it really skill or just good timing? We don't like to admit randomness played a role, so we craft a story that puts us in control. We become the hero of our own financial tale, even if it's not entirely true. And here's the thing. There's nothing inherently wrong with stories. They help us make sense of a complex world, but we need to be aware when we're slipping into narrative comfort zones, when we mistake correlation for causation, when we draw big conclusions from small data sets, or when we take someone else's financial journey and assume it applies to ours. One of the chapter's most powerful messages is that stories can be dangerous when they drive our financial decisions. If you believe the market crashed because of one specific event, you might overreact the next time something similar happens. If you think success comes from one genius move, you might try to replicate it, even when the circumstances are totally different. So how do we guard against this? Husserl suggests a few things. First, embrace uncertainty. You're not supposed to have all the answers. Markets are complex. Outcomes are influenced by things you can't predict or control. Accepting that is actually freeing. Second, be skeptical of overly neat stories, especially ones that offer total explanations. If it sounds too clean, too certain, or too convenient, it probably leaves out important details. Third, build a financial strategy that doesn't rely on perfect stories. Focus on saving consistently. Diversify. Be patient. These are boring principles, but they don't require you to decode every twist and turn of the economy. Finally, respect the role of luck and humility. Success often comes from a mix of skill and randomness. The same goes for failure. That doesn't mean you give up control, but it does mean you stay humble and avoid placing too much weight on any one story, headline, or prediction. In the end, believing in stories is human, but being aware of why we believe them and how they influence our financial behavior is the key to thinking smarter about money. Chapter 19, All Together Now. Let's take a breath here, because this chapter is where everything we've been talking about comes full circle. In Chapter 19 of The Psychology of Money, titled All Together Now, Morgan Housel doesn't introduce a brand new concept. Instead, he ties together the big lessons from the previous 18 chapters into one cohesive, relatable picture of what it really means to be smart with money. Think of it like a life and money highlight reel. Simple truths that stick because they're grounded in real human behavior, not just charts and formulas. Let's start with the first big one. Financial success is not about knowledge, it's about behavior. You could have a PhD in finance and still make bad decisions if you panic during a downturn or get greedy during a boom. On the flip side, someone with average income and no formal education can build wealth through patience, humility, consistency, and a calm mindset. That's why Housel keeps coming back to themes like saving, risk, time, and emotional control. Behavior beats intelligence every single time. Take saving, for example. One of Housel's core messages throughout the book is that you don't need a crazy income to build wealth. You need discipline. Many people think they'll be financially secure once they hit a certain salary, 100,000, 200,000, a million. But without saving, it's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. Housel reminds us, wealth is what you don't see. It's the money you didn't spend, the purchases you postponed, the discipline to live below your means, and then there's the power of time. Remember the story of Warren Buffett? He made the vast majority of his wealth after his 50s, not because of magic stock picks, but because he started early and let compounding do the work. So often we underestimate the impact of time. We want fast results, quick wins, but in investing and in life, the real growth happens slowly, quietly, over decades. That brings us to another key takeaway. You have to stay in the game. Getting rich and staying rich are two different skill sets. One is about taking risks, being optimistic, and spotting opportunity. The other is about humility, frugality, and knowing that things can and will go wrong. You need both. If you swing for the fences without any margin of safety, you might win big once and lose it all the next time. That's why Housel emphasizes room for error. Whether it's your portfolio, your career, or your emergency fund, build in cushion. Expect the unexpected. He also brings back the idea of reasonable, rational. Financial decisions don't live in spreadsheets. They live in your heart, your fears, your goals, your relationships. Maybe buying a house wasn't the smartest move mathematically, but it made you feel safe. Maybe you're more conservative with investments than a textbook recommends because volatility stresses you out. That's okay. What matters is building a strategy you can stick with, even when the market or life gets rough. In other words, consistency beats optimization. And then there's luck. One of the humbling ideas Housel shares is that you're not fully in control of your financial outcome. Yes, your decisions matter, but so does timing, where you were born, who your mentors were, what opportunities you got, and when. That doesn't mean you give up. It just means you stay humble. Don't judge others harshly. Don't idolize people without knowing their full story. And most importantly, don't assume someone else's path is a blueprint for your own. Another insight he revisits here is that money's greatest value is the freedom it buys. Not the fancy car, not the designer clothes, but the ability to wake up and decide how you'll spend your day. Time is the ultimate luxury, and the more financial control you gain, the more time you win back. That's why the most meaningful wealth might not be the biggest paycheck. It might be the ability to work less, travel more, or take care of your family. And let's not forget human psychology. Over and over, Housel shows us that our brains weren't built for modern finance. We evolved to survive, not to trade stocks or optimize portfolios. We get scared. We chase trends. We compare ourselves to others. We seek comfort in stories, even if they're false. The sooner we recognize these biases, the better we can protect ourselves from our own impulses. So, what does this all mean in real life? Here's the gist. Save more than you spend. Even if it's small, save consistently. Be patient. Let time and compounding work their magic. Avoid debt like the plague, especially high-interest, lifestyle-driven debt. Give yourself a buffer. Always assume something will go wrong and plan for it. Keep it simple. You don't need the hottest stocks or most complex strategy. Index funds, emergency funds, and living below your means go a long way. Stay humble. You're not invincible. You're not always right. That's okay. Define your own success. Forget what others are doing. Decide what matters to you and build your financial life around that. What makes this chapter so powerful is how it recenters the conversation. It's not about being perfect. It's about being thoughtful, about knowing your own values, embracing imperfection, and playing the long game. The real beauty of money, Housel reminds us, isn't in the number. It's in the options it gives you, the peace it provides, and the life it helps you live on your own terms. So yeah, altogether now, it's not about getting rich quick. It's about staying rich, thinking long-term, keeping your cool, and remembering that money is a tool, not the goal. Simple? Yes. Easy? Not always. Worth it? Absolutely. Chapter 20, Confessions. This final chapter of The Psychology of Money, titled Confessions, is Morgan Housel's personal truth. It's a moment where he pulls back the curtain, not to give financial advice, but to admit how he personally manages his own money. And let me tell you, this isn't about maximizing returns or beating the market. In fact, it's the opposite. It's humble. It's realistic. It's very human. Morgan starts by making something very clear. He doesn't try to maximize for the highest possible financial returns. That might sound surprising, especially coming from a guy who spent his career studying money and investing. But here's the thing. He knows himself. He knows his personality, his risk tolerance, and his long-term goals. And so he builds a financial life that fits those things, not one that tries to impress a spreadsheet or chase someone else's version of success. He confesses that he and his wife save a significant portion of their income, not just because they want to retire early or buy a fancy house, but because they value independence. That word comes up again and again throughout the book, and here it hits home. For the Housels, having money saved is less about the stuff it can buy and more about the control it gives them over their time and decisions. Now, what's interesting is that he doesn't own flashy investments. He doesn't pick individual stocks. He doesn't try to time the market. He's not hunting for the next Tesla or riding the crypto wave. Most of his money is in plain old index funds. Why? Because it works. It's simple. It's boring. And boring is good when it comes to wealth building. This is a powerful message, especially in today's world, where social media is filled with influencers showing off luxury lifestyles and self-proclaimed financial gurus pushing get-rich-quick schemes. Housel's confession is a breath of fresh air. I just want to sleep well at night. That's his investing goal. Not maximum returns, not bragging rights, just peace of mind. He also admits to doing things that aren't perfectly rational, but they feel right. For example, he paid off his mortgage early, even though the math told him he could have earned more by investing that money. Why? Because the psychological benefit of knowing his home is paid off, of not owing anyone, was worth more to him than a slightly higher return on paper. And that's one of the most important lessons in this chapter. What's right for you might not be right for someone else. Financial decisions aren't one size fits all. They're personal, they're emotional, they're about more than numbers. Let's take a moment to reflect on how rare this kind of honesty is. Most finance books try to tell you what you should do, the best investment, the perfect savings rate, the ideal asset allocation. But Morgan, he's telling you what he does. He's saying, here's how I think about money based on who I am and what I value. And it might not be for everyone, and that's okay. It's a big permission slip to think differently. Maybe you're like Morgan and want more control over your time. Or maybe your goals are completely different. You want to build a business, travel the world, or leave a legacy for your kids. The point is, you don't need to follow someone else's financial playbook. You just need to know what matters to you and build your money habits around that. Another confession Morgan makes is that he doesn't care what other people are doing with their money. He doesn't chase trends or compare himself to others. This is huge, especially in a culture that's constantly telling us to keep up, whether that's keeping up with your neighbor's new SUV or your coworker's crypto gains. But Housel says comparison is the thief of joy. And honestly, he's right. You'll always feel behind if you're measuring your life with someone else's ruler. So instead, focus inward. Ask yourself, what do I want money to do for me? Maybe it's security. Maybe it's flexibility. Maybe it's the ability to say no to things that don't align with your values. Whatever it is, your financial life should serve you, not society, not your friends, not some imaginary version of success. One of the most profound takeaways from this chapter is that you don't have to be extreme to be successful with money. You don't need to live on rice and beans to save. You don't need to own 20 properties or trade stocks every day. In fact, some of the best strategies are the simplest ones. Save consistently, avoid unnecessary debt, invest in what you understand, and give your money time to grow. Morgan closes the book with humility. He doesn't pretend to have all the answers. He just knows what works for him, and he encourages you to find what works for you. That's the essence of financial wisdom. It's not about being perfect, it's about being intentional. So if you take nothing else from this chapter, take this. Money is personal, your journey is your own. And the most powerful thing you can do is create a financial life that supports your values, gives you peace of mind, and helps you live the kind of life you truly want. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real definition of wealth. Conclusion. In the conclusion of The Psychology of Money, Morgan Housel emphasizes that managing money is more about human behavior than complex financial knowledge. He highlights that financial success doesn't require genius-level IQ or perfect timing. It requires understanding your own emotions, biases, and goals. The key takeaway is that personal finance is deeply individual. What works for one person might not work for another, and that's okay. True wealth is not just about having money. It's about having freedom, security, and the ability to live life on your own terms. By focusing on long-term thinking, saving more than you spend, preparing for uncertainty, and avoiding the temptation to compare yourself to others, you can create financial stability and peace of mind. In the end, mastering the psychology of money is the most valuable financial skill you can have. If you found this summary of the psychology of money valuable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insightful audiobooks on finance and personal growth. We'd love to hear from you. Comment below and share your biggest takeaway from this book. What lesson resonated with you the most? Let's continue the conversation and learn together. See you in the next one.